The last Saturday in October always means one thing in Jacksonville: Florida, Georgia. Along the banks of the St. Johns River, both fan bases convene for one of the most intense battles in all of college football. Led by Mark Richt, the Dogs reignited the rivalry in 2007.
That's the whole team!
The whole team is on the field right now.
Then Urban Meyer's Gators snapped back 1 year later. In 2010, a rare instance of a coach taunting a player with the player prevailing. 2 years later, a fumble was forced and tears were shed. Fast forward a decade, and both programs are in much different spots. Georgia, fresh off its first national championship in 41 years, looking for another.
You look at what you've done well, what you've done poorly, and how can we do it better? And we sit down as coaches and say, all right, what do we need to do to win the next 5 games, 6 games, and we target that area.
Florida is on its 5th head coach in 12 years, searching for stability and success. And Billy Napier is fully aware of the opportunity that lies ahead.
Defending national champs and the #1 team in the country presents a great opportunity, and certainly we look forward to it.
These two programs hate each other so much, they can't even agree on how many times they've played. But one thing is for certain: the stadium in Jacksonville will be split down the middle, with red and black on one side and orange and blue on the other. And this gathering won't be friendly. It's a rivalry that represents what we love about college football, and we've got a front row seat on CBS.
Yes, we do have a front row seat. Let's now welcome in the voice of the SEC on CBS, Brad Nessler, who will be in his spot on the call for this game, joining us here today. Brad, we're approaching the 90th anniversary of this game taking place in Jacksonville. Now, there's some question about the future of the game there. Kirby said over the summer, hey, look, I would like to see this game moved so that we can get recruits in to watch this game. What are your thoughts on the prospect of this historic game not being played in Jacksonville?
Well, Jeremy, I'd love it in Jacksonville. I just like that, blue and orange and red and black split down the middle, sort of like the Red River rivalry with Oklahoma and Texas that I did a number of times. I get what Kirby's going for, and he's been pushing for it for 7 years, ever since he became the head coach of Georgia. He wants that opportunity to have the kids come into Athens. You can show them around. They can spend the whole weekend. You go down to Jacksonville, they can get a ticket and pick it up at the gate, and they can go to the game, but there's not a lot of interaction between the coaches and the prospects or recruits. So I get it, but the city of Jacksonville doesn't want to give up $30 million, although Athens and Gainesville would like to pick up about $20 million if it becomes a home and home. So a lot of money involved. There's a lot of tradition involved. I don't know who's going to come out on top of this. I know we've got this year and next year, and then I guess we'll go from there, because when Texas and Oklahoma come into the SEC, maybe they'll change things around. But I get the coaches' theory, but, they don't care about all the fans that go down there and spend a whole weekend and spend millions of dollars. So that's not their concern. The coaches are more concerned about making millions of dollars personally, not what the fans are doing.
The game in Jacksonville since 1933. Okay, let's get to the game here. A year ago, Anthony Richardson made his first start for Florida in this game, and he left that game beaten and bruised. He turned the ball over 3 times in a loss. What's your assessment of Richardson a year later as he comes into this game?
Well, yeah, last year he was not ready, but, Emory Jones wasn't either, I guess, and they just had to do something. And he got in there, he got rattled. It was a 1-touchdown game with 2 minutes to go in the half. And then there's fumble, interception, pick six, and all of a sudden there's 21 points for Georgia in the last 2 minutes of the second quarter. And as you said before we went to the break, this is a game that could be over at halftime, or it could be a thriller all the way to the end. That one was over at halftime just because of how that couple of minutes has gone. Now, we've seen him get better, more mature. We saw him against Tennessee. He probably can't play that good ever again. I mean, he was unbelievable against Tennessee. Over 400 yards passing. He did great with his legs, scoring touchdowns on the ground. I mean, he looked like a Heisman candidate in that game. And, if he plays like that, he's going to have to play like that, I think, for Florida to have a chance. He's just so inconsistent right now. He can do beautiful things, and then the next play, it's horrible. And he can complete 75% of his passes, and the next week it's 55. So his second halves, I think he gets beat around a little bit, and that has something to do with it, because when he does run, he's a dynamic runner, but he takes some shots. So that might have something to do with his second half declines.
He has said that game in particular last year has kind of rattled around in his head all offseason, and he is ready for another shot at the Bulldogs. But as you said, he's going to have to play like he did against Tennessee in order to give Florida a fighting chance in this one. Georgia, they're averaging 500 yards of offense or more per game. They're outscoring teams 41-9 on average. Coming off a 55-0 win over Vanderbilt, they had the bye week. Brad, this offense is hitting its stride.
Yeah, it is, Jeremy. I think they're playing. They don't have maybe as dynamic of players on either side of the ball, but team-wise, they're playing just as well as they were last year. They're scoring more points. As you said, they're 41-42. Last year at this time, I think they were around 37. Stetson Bennett's a year better, and him a year better. If he gets A.D. Mitchell and guys like that back in the lineup, he spreads it around so beautifully. He's thrown to 20 different guys out of the backfield, the tight ends. Their tight end room is better than anybody else's in the country. Their time of possession, that's kind of a key with them because their ground game's so good. But when you throw for 320 something and you rush for 200, you can't ask for better balanced. And they've only had one interception all year long. So, when you look at total yardage, they're right up there just about with nobody's with Tennessee, but that's a different kind of offense. But great balance. And I think they're playing as well offensively as they were this time last year, maybe better.
Bulldogs certainly frontrunners in the college football playoff conversation as they look to repeat as champions. During the bye week, Brad, did you get the sense that Kirby hammered home to his team the fact that there is just no letting up as they hit the home stretch here?
He does that all the time. But yeah, when they have a week off, they go back. They took Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. Their last practice was Thursday. They came back at the beginning of this week. He wasn't happy with the way they practiced on Monday. I knew he'd say that even if he was thrilled. And, they got back to work, and they're getting back after it. They're getting healthier. I don't know if they'll have A.D. Mitchell. I don't know if they'll have Jalen Carter. Those guys are closer right now. Smell Munden, I think the linebacker is going to be back. So I look at them and go, I think that's about as good as they're going to get at this point in the season. And, I think Billy Napier thinks his guys are pretty healthy too. So that's kind of the reason I like the bye week, is you get a little more of a sense of who's going to play and who's not, even though the coaches won't tell you that.
The stretch run starts with Florida this week in Jacksonville. Historic rivalry game. Bulldogs 22.5-point favorites. The total at 56 and a hook. What kind of a game are you expecting to see?
Well, I don't know. I really don't. Usually I really don't. Usually we go, the team that rushes the ball best wins this thing 17 out of the last 18 times. I don't know. In 2020, I thought Georgia would blow Florida away, and Florida won the game. So these rivalry games are kind of weird that way sometimes. Turnovers will make a difference. Whoever turns the ball over less is going to win. Georgia should win. I don't look at point spreads and all that stuff, but they're better than Florida. And if they play like they're capable of playing, they should be able to get ready for Tennessee the following week in what will be even a bigger game.
And Brad, as we know across all sports, when it comes to these hardcore rivalry games, you really do just never know. The numbers don't tell the story going into the game. Brad Nessler joining us here on HQ to break down Georgia and Florida meeting in Jacksonville this Saturday. Brad, thanks for taking the time for us today.
It's going to be fun, Jeremy, one way or the other. And I'll be looking for my friends down there that have the rolling recliner leather chairs with the cooler they pull behind it, the motorized leather chairs. It's my favorite thing down there.
All right, Brad, enjoy the game. We'll see you on CBS on Saturday. As mentioned, both of the teams coming off the bye week. They'll be rested and ready. And for Florida, a win. Boy, oh boy, would it be huge for them to knock off the number one team in the nation. They last beat a number 5 Georgia back in 2020. That was also their last win over a top 5 team. Brad will be alongside Gary Danielson, Jenny Dell. Game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS and, of course, streaming over on Paramount+. We're not done with this game. On the other side, Chip Patterson and Barrett Salee are going to pop by to break down the game plans for both teams as the Gators go for the upset against the top team in the nation. More HQ coming up. 89 years ago, Florida and Georgia agreed to have an annual game in Jacksonville because both schools could access the city by railroad. Times have drastically changed, as has the game, but the venue stays the same, and this time out, it's a game between two teams headed in opposite directions. Florida reeling, coming off a loss to LSU, sitting 1-3 in conference play. Georgia continue to trend towards becoming repeat champions, a bid they can continue to bolster Saturday on CBS. As our SEC Super Preview continues, Chip Patterson, Barrett Sallee will be keen observers, and they'll be discussing this game on the Cover 3 podcast, but we have them here to discuss it now. Chip, I'll start with you. Florida still adjusting to first-year head coach Billy Napier. What's their game plan to try and knock off the number one team in the land?
Oh, you need Anthony Richardson to be an absolute superstar. We're talking touchdowns on the ground. We're talking touchdowns through the air. We need to see Anthony Richardson to take that game that he had against Utah, the one that had us all overreacting, throwing him in the Heisman Trophy conversation. It needs to be even better than that because the opponent is even better than that. And so I do think that Richardson, in flashes, has given us the kind of belief that he can reach that level. But that is what it's going to take against a defense that is so balanced, that is good against the run and good against the pass. Anthony Richardson needs to be better than both. He could be the best player on the field in Jacksonville when Florida's offense is out there against Georgia's defense, but he has not shown that kind of consistency through the year. So if Florida's going to do it, then it needs Richardson to be a stud.
Yeah, there's no doubt that's the case. And I'm going to go to the other side of the ball. I think if Florida's going to slow down Georgia, it has to pressure QB Stetson Bennett. And Florida's defensive backfield, their secondary has been awful. Last time we saw them, Jaden Daniels was picking them apart. Now, granted, LSU's offense has gotten better over recent weeks, but this Florida secondary has been a liability. So how do you stop that? You pressure the quarterback. Now, that is easier said than done. Stetson Bennett has been money this year, both from a pure yardage standpoint, but also a yards per attempt standpoint. He actually is a deep threat. But since he is a deep threat, that gives the defensive front more time to get after him. And Florida's a little thin in that department right now. But if they're going to win this game, they have to force Stetson Bennett into some uncharacteristic mistakes. They can't do it with only their secondary. They got to get help up front.
They've lost 4 of their last 5 meetings versus the Bulldogs, that lone win coming in 2020. Okay, so Barrett, what are you preparing for if you're Georgia in this spot?
Stop Anthony Richardson on the ground. That's the easiest thing to do. It's the easiest game plan for a defense is to stop Anthony Richardson on the ground. He has more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns, and no, that is not a compliment. This guy is, I think, maybe bought into his own hype a little bit, or he was premature with this hype. But what we do know right now is that Georgia's front seven, led by Nolan Smith, is absolutely filthy, and they could be getting Jalen Carter back in the interior of that defensive line as well. So they're going to focus on Anthony Richardson. If they stop him via the run, I don't think he has what it takes, not only from a passing standpoint, but also from a wide receiver standpoint, to pick that Georgia defense apart.
Look, Georgia can have an okay performance and win this game, but if we're talking about blowing past Florida, covering this massive spread in a rivalry game, then we need something that has been a little bit missing from Georgia's offensive attack, and that is explosive plays in the pass game. Now, we have seen that drop off a little bit because of injuries at the wide receiver position, and A.D. Mitchell still trying to work his way back. That is a big part of it, but Stetson Bennett needs to be able to step up and create those explosive plays in the pass game. He had it rolling against Oregon. He had it rolling at the beginning of the season. He has been able to do it against some of the lesser opponents, but I think that creating those explosive plays is how Georgia takes a grinder of a win and turns it into a blowout win that includes covering the spread. Again, an okay performance, a C+, B- performance by Georgia's offense still can win in Jacksonville. But if you want to take this offense to the next level, let's reintroduce those explosive plays in the passing game.
And certainly on the defensive side, they're getting things done. I mean, only allowing 9.1 points against per game. All right, so you guys see the line. It's gone from 22 points at the start to 22.5 now. The total static at 56.5. What's your play on the line here, Chip?
I'm going to go with the total, and I am going to go under because there are so many different ways that we can cash this under, because the one thing that I feel the most confident in about any way that I look at this game is that Georgia's defense is going to keep Anthony Richardson and Florida's offense in check. Now, is Georgia's offense going to sputter its wheels a little bit and lead this thing to be in a little bit of a sweat for that big number for the rivalry game? Maybe. Or is Georgia going to blow them out? Sure, but even 40-10 is a cash for the under. So with a lot of different ways to get home, I'm going to go under 56.5.
I'm going to take Georgia to cruise, but Florida to cover. At 22.5, it just screams backdoor cover because, Chip, like you mentioned, Georgia's defense is really the only known commodity in this game. So because of that, they're going to take control, and I think they throttle down early in the fourth quarter. So whether it's a 3-touchdown game at that point or even a 4 or 5 touchdown game, that does feel like backdoor cover is in play. So I'll grab those points with Florida. I don't think it'll be an issue for Georgia, but I don't think they get too creative in the second half because they won't need to.
Barrett Sallee, Chip Patterson breaking down our SEC game of the week between Florida and Georgia in Jacksonville. Bulldogs looking to go to 8-0. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Of course, they'll be breaking the game down later this week on the Cover 3 podcast alongside Tom Fornelli and Bud Elliott. You can download and follow wherever you get your podcast audio. And in terms of the game itself, it is Florida-Georgia, our SEC game of the week, 89th edition in Jacksonville. Kickoff 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS. You can also stream the game on Paramount Plus.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.